Hello world, and this is Morgan T. Doolaman speaking. I am probably about to give the most horrifying, most controversial take on a certain situation currently going on in a country that people are hearing more of in the news right now, which I will not directly say, because if you broach some topics, without using without giving the correct opinion, or and you're not big enough, well, that might create problems. But looking at this whole situation, I guess what takes me aback is how fast people pick sides. Because you gotta think, this is not the first time we've seen the particular lockstep take by a lot of media figures before, and then they led us into doing some other foolish things, or they tried in some cases to lead us into doing some foolish things beforehand. Let's see, when I remember off the top of my head, there was the time where a lot of panic by media and politicians led us to a certain country which we recently left, and not victoriously, I might add. In a country in the Middle East, there was another incident where, that led to us toppling another fellow, one with a rather interesting taste, who had I suppose, some rather interesting ambitions, and I'm not going to claim he was a very nice man. In another Middle Eastern country, we toppled him, left a couple of years later, and then within a few short years, we saw a very fun group of guys take over an area about the size of Great Britain in there, and I'm not entirely sure they're completely gone just yet. I know they've been pretty much squashed in the region that they named themselves for, at least initially, but I believe they still have some branches in another area, one in North Africa. We went in there, I believe, in 2015, on the same spin of how the guy who was in charge there was an evil dictator who needed to be overthrown in the name of freedom. And like clockwork, we went in there, before people even knew about it even, and we toppled him, we won, we came, we saw, and bad things happened to him. And then the country kind of fell apart. In fact, I believe that they're still in their second civil war. And again, we ended up creating so much chaos that allowed the fun guys from the last country I mentioned to, set up camp there too. And I believe they're still there. And now, and then there was that other incident a couple of years back when the T-Man was in office. Another Middle Eastern country that we nearly got involved in, on the spin about how the guy there is evil madman, another dictator who needs to be overthrown in the name of freedom and liberty, and who performed some unsanctioned actions, some unrighteous actions against the citizens, which we later found out may have been performed by people he was fighting with, and how it wouldn't have made sense for him to have committed such an act in the first place, because he was already winning the war by that point. There was no need to go making things worse for himself and drawing the ire of the Western world by doing such a thing. Just saying. And now we're here again, and in a senatorial election year too. How fun is that? And if you think that this is all my giving support to a certain bald fellow reigning from a northern nation, and that, or me taking a side against the government and people, the government, I should say, led by the comedian turned president, in the smaller nation, it's not quite that. I'm just saying, I want people to take this with a more critical eye than maybe we've been led to up to this point. Just think about this. How much do we actually know about what happened? We know that we know that one side rolled in there pretty quick. We know that this conflict's been simmering for some time. In fact, following some videos by a particular channel, I believe it was one that follows the affairs of the Eastern Orthodox Church. I happen to know that this has even taken some religious aspects with people in the smaller country experiencing some schismatic arguments because they want to, they don't want to be ruled by a church that seems to be overly influenced by the government of the larger country. Again, I'm sorry if I'm using some very vague terminology, but that's the way the cookie crumbles nowadays. And I'm not trying to be harsh here or claiming that I'm an uber expert on all of this stuff. I'm not. I'm just asking people to say, okay, there's a lot of history to this region. There's a lot of conflicts. Both of these governments have their corrupt elements. Both of them have very patriotic elements. Both of them have probably some decent men working in them, and both of them have some rather nasty men working at them. And that might include some people who, aren't the nicest, and who aren't the, I'm just saying we should probably take this with a bit more of a critical eye than we tend to when it comes to these political affairs. Before, I mentioned this at a comment under TFI Global's video. I can't remember which one, but it was a recent one. That's the frustrated Indian Global, by the way. They've taken a pretty pro-big country stance thus far. At least more so than the Western media, definitely. But, to each their own, I guess. I understand that their country and that one is, and the bigger one have perhaps a more positive relationship than ours does. So that might be a contributing factor. But then again, there's probably a lot of different variables going into it. All I'm asking people to do, anyone who actually sees this, is to just think, okay, the same people who led us to conflict after conflict after conflict after conflict, and who nearly got us involved in much more, have done a very good job of lying to us to do it. And we have lost a lot in terms of resources and men and women who we're not going to be getting back, and others who have come back and they came back changed. And, well, the cause of the war didn't really stand up to scrutiny like we thought it would going in. And a lot of times we allowed ourselves to be talked into it and our hearts to be impassioned, even though, again, looking back, it wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be. I'm not, so with that in mind, maybe it would just be good to take a step back, take a good long look at the situation. Don't try memeing or arguing about or yelling or condemning one side or the other. Just take a step back and ask, what's the history of the region? What are the different competing interests? What are the different, what is the strategy and what is the playbook and the ideas of the people who are running this whole conflict? And what I was saying under that TFI thing was why we should be doing that instead of what we normally do is because right before we went into one of those particular ones, the more mountainous one, I should say, a government nearby who doesn't tend to like us very much, actually, and who the guys at TFI don't tend to like very much, I should say, actually begged us not to and to consider the history. And our ambassador said, no, the history starts today. And that got us into a quagmire that lasted 20 years. that is the cost of blind arrogance and rashness. And that is what I am asking us to try battling against within ourselves right now. Look, I don't claim to know, I'm not necessarily siding with either regime or with one side against the other. I'd like them to be able to make peace. And being a Christian myself, though not Orthodox, I would very much like to see the church avoid that, that schism I mentioned earlier, just because I grew, when I was a younger fellow, my church went through something of a, I mean a local church, mind you, it went through something of a schism, and I saw it do damage to a lot of families in a lot of different ways, and it, for lack of a better term, left a dagger in my heart that lasted, it took a while to pry out. And I can't imagine what kind of damage it would do to do that to the metropolitan of an entire country. I'm just saying, let's not be governed by our emotions. Let's be governed by, reason. Let's look at what is going on here. Take it critically. Try to look at the timeline of events, and then just piece together what is going on, who are the players, what are the interests, and if needs be, what is our part in this whole thing? Because frankly, I don't think it is a given that this particular conflict is our fight. So, yeah. If anyone actually comes across this, I'm not trying to be arrogant, I'm just trying to make sure things don't get nasty. Alright? Or, well, nastier than they already have gotten. Yeah. Anyway, have a good one.